Hi, guys. We're at chapter 7 of The River by Gary Paulsen. When last we left off, Brian and Derek had just settled down for the evening. They were sort of wishing they'd had a better shelter. Brian said he could hear the rain coming. So first night, here we go. The rain came about 11. Derek had time for one quick joke. You said it would be 6.5 hours. It's almost 7. Then it hit him, and there was nothing but water. They were immediately soaked, then more soaked, sloppy with water. They tried moving beneath some overhanging thick willows and birch near the edge of the lake, but the trees also did nothing to slow down the downpour, and finally they just sat, huddled beneath the willows, and took it. I have, Brian thought, always been wet. Always. Even my soul is wet. He felt the water running down his back. He judged it to be about the same rate as the faucet in his kitchen sink at home, and that made him think of his mother, sitting at the table, the dining room table, with a roof. He'd forgotten how nice a roof could be. This is crazy, he said aloud to Derek next to him, but the rain took the words away, and he leaned against a birch and closed his eyes and finally took it. I'm here, he thought, to show Derek how I did it, how this can be done for other people. And right now, there's nothing to do but take it. And somehow, the night passed. Close to dawn, the rain stopped, and there was a softness after the rain, almost a warmth, and that brought the mosquitoes back for one more run. By the time the sun came up, full up over the lake, and brought the warmth, Brian felt like he'd been hit by a truck while playing in a puddle. He ached all over. And when he turned to see Derek, leaned back against a tree sideways, curled into a ball with his jacket still over his head, Brian laughed. The sound awakened Derek, who was not really asleep, and he looked out of the jacket. What's so funny? Brian shook his head. I guess it's not funny, but you look so miserable. You ought to see yourself, Derek grinned, kind of like a drowned rat. That's about how I feel. They stood, and Brian moved down to the shore of the lake. He stripped his clothes down to his shorts and wrung them out and hung them on some branches to dry. This day, he thought, this day we must find shelter and a firestone and get some fire going and get some food. Hunger was already there. Not the kind that would come later, the cutting kind he remembered so well, and that still made his mouth water when he walked past a grocery store or a fast food place, but it was there. We have a problem, Derek said suddenly. He had moved down to the lake shore as well, and had stripped down to hang his clothes dry. That's for sure, Brian said. We've definitely got a problem. No, not what we're doing here. I mean, we have a problem with you. What do you mean? You're so quiet. I mean, I see you looking at things and thinking, but I don't know what you're thinking about or what you're working out. I have to know all this to write about it, to tell people what to do. Brian nodded. I understand. It's just that the last time I did this, I was alone. I would have killed, Brian thought suddenly, for someone to talk to, someone to share it with, someone to hear me. And now I have someone, I don't talk. It's kind of strange having someone here with me. Derek nodded. That's what I mean. You have to tell me everything. Externalize it all for me so I can write it. Derek moved back to where the lean-to was, where he'd left the radio and his weatherproof briefcase. Inside the briefcase, he had notebooks, each one in a plastic bag, and he took one out now with a pencil and began to write carefully. When he'd written something, he looked up at Brian, waiting. All right, I'm ready. Externalize, Brian thought. How do you externalize? Well, I'm thinking now that we should make sure we get a shelter today, and then get a fire today, and get some food today. I sound like a catalog, he thought, like I'm reading a telephone book. But Derek nodded and started writing, and Brian thought of what he really wanted to say. We should grab the radio and call for the plane and go home and eat a hamburger and a malt, maybe 8 to 10 Cokes, a steak, some roasts, a pork chop. He shook his head. There, Derek said. What were you thinking just there? Brian stared at him, then shook his head. You don't want to know. Just junk. He walked away into the day. It was enough talk, enough externalizing. Another night like last night would kill him. He left his clothes to dry, but wore his tennis shoes and noticed that Derek did the same thing, although he carried the notebooks as well, and Brian set off along the lakeshore to the left. Rule 1, he thought, don't leave the lakeshore or you'll get lost. Then he remembered Derek and said it out loud. Thank you, Derek said, rather properly. Standing in his underwear, holding the notebook, he looked like somebody out of an old funny movie, and Brian had trouble keeping a straight face. That's exactly what I mean by externalizing. We're looking for a firestone, a shelter, and food all at once. Always, always you look for food. There, up along the edge of the clearing. You see those stumps? Derek nodded. Those will be a good bet for grubworms later. Grubworms? Sure, bears eat them. Love to eat them. I can't eat them yet, but by about the third day, if we don't find something else or get some fish, they'll probably be looking pretty good. Grubworms. Brian smiled. I thought you did this survival thing once before. Oh, we ate lizards and snakes and stuff like that. They always have, of course, in the desert, or did until now. I think it'll change. And you always read about people eating ants and grasshoppers, but I've never eaten a grubworm. You don't chew them, Brian said. I think that would just be too much. Just to chew one up, guts and all, they're too soft and, well, just too soft. But if you wrap them in leaves and swallow them whole, right. Derek nodded and wrote in his notebook, grubworms. Brian stopped and turned to Derek. Food is everything. What do you mean? Just that. Out there in nature, in the world, food is everything. All the other parts of what we are, what everything is, don't matter without food. I read somewhere that all of what a man is, everything man has always been or will be, all the thoughts and dreams and sex and hate and every little thing is dependent on 6 inches of topsoil and rain when you need it to make a crop and grow food. You sound like you've thought this out. That's all I did. Think of food. You watch other animals, birds, fish, even down to ants. They spend all their time working at food, getting something to eat. That's what nature is really, getting food. And when you're out there having to live, you look for food. Food first, food, food. They moved through the day that way. During mid-morning, they found some raspberries growing in a brush pile. It wasn't a thick stand. It would maybe have been enough for one person. But with 2, it was skimpy. Still, there were some, and they worked through the brush in their underwear, eating every berry they could find. They also found choke cherries, what Brian called gut cherries. Brian shook his head. Later, if we have to, and in small amounts. Brian kept moving along the lake, waiting, walking, and waiting, and he realized at length what he was waiting for, what was in the back of his mind. Luck. You move, and you watch, and you work hard, and you just keep doing that until luck comes. If it's bad luck, you ride it out. And if it comes to the other way, and you have good luck, you're ready for it. They had good luck in the middle of the afternoon. And as so often seems to happen, the good luck came about because of bad luck.